From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. All right, everyone, thank you so much for coming. First off, I want to say that the speakers today do not consent to being filmed or recorded and would very much prefer that you did not do that for our safety. Yeah, thank you all for coming out here. Louder. All right, we are here today to gather together in support of the Palestinians and their resistance. We know that it is our duty here in the West to stand up for them and to support them and to fight back against the United States and their support of the Zionist regime in Israel. We're going to have a few speakers today. We're going to hear some poetry, and then we're going to go for a little walk and let this town know how we feel and how loud we can be for our support for the Palestinians. There are a lot of signs up here and some flags and some masks and some other things. Feel free to come up and grab some. Oh, there's still more people coming in. This is awesome. Thank you so much, Eugene. All right, so without further ado, we are going to have our first speaker come up and talk to you a little bit, all right? How's that sound? Yeah. All right, thank you so much.
Hey, y'all, can you hear me all right? All right, great, because we don't have a mic stand, so I have to try to read and talk at the same time. So if you can't hear me, please tell me to speak up, all right? The first poem I'm going to read today is actually an excerpt by Mahmoud Darwish. In his work, Absent Presence. I have seen martyrs standing, each on his star, glad of the hope they have brought to the living dead. You have seen a country adorned by martyrs who, because of it, have risen above it in inspiration. And they return to it, green and blue, relentless in the education of their children. Die that I may live. They make no excuse. They do not forget their instruction to their children. You are tomorrow. Live that we may live in you. Love the pomegranate blossom, the lemon blossom. Pour out our wine at the festival of love. We found no time to drink it with you. Alas, we did not find the time. Do not forget to find the time to celebrate love. With love, take revenge for us and for you. That was Mahmoud Darwish, Absent Presence. This next thing I'm going to read, it's kind of a poem, it's kind of a speech. I'll read it slow, bear with me. I dig a bed of sorrow into an endless stream of news stories. I look for the truth, I take in, I listen critically. My grandmother said at the start of this, don't believe them, mijo. The media, it is out of control. Just find the truth. Believe in the truth. I breathe it through my belly. I let it break my heart. I let it raise my spirits. I let myself be brave. Not too long ago, there was a time of unrest within our cities. The streets were wildfires, and rubber bullets broke the wind. I remember lying in the sick bed of news then. I remember how easy it is for some folks to block out the things that don't seem right. So I try to remember, I try to recall intentionally the truths and put them together. Shining through a tourmaline, I can start to form the patterns from genocides to militarized. How did all this happen? I recall Israeli soldiers training the American police forces. I recall every ungodly image, broken soul experience, corpses of police brutality, symptom of supremacy. I recall the Nakba glossed over in history class, and that it seemed so complex at the time, and the large cod liver spoon of two-state solutions was always next. I remembered then the coups and the war crimes in South America that never got news coverage. That people were pointing to this apartheid long before October 7th. How many families, children, hospitals, schools wiped from the earth when the world wasn't looking. And now see what began in blood that has never stopped bleeding. I belong to the people which belong to the land that has seen the likes of these cages before. When the borders cross over you like a sheet in the night, and your name is torn from your tongue. And war is raged with a blinding loudness. Kingdoms set and are toppled by newer, worser kingdoms over the graves of your people. Settler colonialism has advanced following the rise of its children. Global capitalism and imperialism seething to own the world. A great serpent with the world in its fangs. More than 750 military bases in at least 80 other countries, venom setting in. U.S. influence thrashes its way across the globe, sopping up the fruits of our labor, the workers, the marginalized, the peasants, the poor, interlocking pieces to the resistance of the oppressed. Scattered and bruised into forgetting our enemy is Stockholm syndroming us into dreaming that we are free, or else playing free at the expense of those who suffer under the same conditions that many of our peoples faced. It was not so long ago, and some we are still facing, those of us that know that the enemy has in its tool shed the patience to wait for the world to forget you and snuff out your voice and then violate you in every way possible. Violence takes two forms, one of action and reaction, colonization and decolonization. You can only push so far until the lion bites. A rose will not give up its thorns for you to take its only bed. There is always the violence of resisting violence, that of pulling the enemy's blade from your back. In seeing the cycles of history turn, I make no mistake that the exploiters, the oppressors, are their own undoing. In their insatiable appetite for the fruits of our labor, their lust for foreign lands, they create the conditions of people's revolt. Do not forget yourself. You are the opposition. You are the response to injustice, the uproar, the wild iris blooming in a boot print, determined to survive. Together, we are the masses that turn the clocks of history forward, that paint the hills with wildflowers. We will scream the truth so that all of history shakes down the necks and backs of the willful oblivious. Palestinian liberation can no longer wait at the barbed wire gates of diplomacy. In the trenches of night, at the edge of a burning city, have you caught their cries in the jars of your ears? Have the children's shutting eyes brought staleness to the bread of your comfort? Are you now praying with no words? Welcome to history in the making. Watch it stir. Feel it flow. Inspiration. Inspiration. That of how a people grew a movement from a broken olive branch in an abandoned lot where there was once a school, one root reaching to touch all roots of oppression, and grew despite all 75 years of suppression by a bloodthirsty state, to fill the mouths of all in the world hungry for liberation with the glorious words, "Free Palestine, Palestina Ahara, Free Palestine." What does this mean? What does this look like? A fallen building, a crying child. Dishonest governments spreading sinister delusions through the buzzing wires of media. Follow the money all the way to the top, the president shaking hands as murderers do with other murderers, while the sky crashes down over Gaza. The truth is found where it is sought, not to be carried without a thought, but to be a guiding light in the darkness, not to submit to the cold forced upon us, but to help us find a way out. They break down the fences. They soar with the mastery of the only thing known to be free, the sweet air. Many do not leave when commanded by the enemy. For them, the choice to be killed either here or there is no choice at all. To be killed all at once or over decades is the choice of fools. To die on one's feet is to have lived 1,000 lifetimes in the rosebud hearts of a fighting people. What began in love, that will always be in love. I breathe it through my belly. I let it break my heart. I let it raise my spirits. I let myself be brave. Woo! So what do we do, the makers of history? How do we react when the world is shaking? By coming together, mobilizing, organizing, unionizing, using what collective power we have to affect change. Burn into your mind that the struggle is always ongoing in our lives, and we are to prepare for the next earth-shattering event after the next. To harness the power of the collective so that as things get worse in the world and clowns in government juggle and leverage our struggles, our livelihoods for votes, we will need an organized people, people uniting over differences, a people not afraid to speak to one another about things that matter, and ever importantly, a people who will listen critically and compassionately to one another. A people not afraid to be wrong or have their minds changed, but equally not afraid to speak out. We will create and evolve the channels that bring people together in common struggle, that teach people how to share with, learn from, and fight for one another on a larger scale than you could ever dream, by being more involved in our communities, by keeping up with world events, finding the patterns, tying together struggles. The enemy wants a people divided, and the enemy wants a people divided, and will stir the pot to deflect from itself. A community planted so firmly in the earth it can stand against anything is our mission, and it is our responsibility to create those conditions. Labor unions are one of the greatest channels for change. Tenant unions, study groups that combine knowledge and action, research, learn. Be critical, always, of speakers, of media. Ask yourself, in whose interest is this? And above all else, Look for the truth.
Give it up one more time for those beautiful words. I would like to take some time to speak about something that is very personal to me. One of the many misconceptions going around right now is that being for the liberation of the Palestinian people means that you are anti-Semitic, but this couldn't be further from the truth. When I was young, I asked my grandmother why she never moved to Israel, why she never wanted to live with our people. They traded the inside of concentration camps for the outside of one, she said. They weaponized our trauma. There is no salvation for Jews there, no safety in the lands of others taken by bombs and bullets. Besides, she said, I wouldn't have been able to talk to any of them there. And if you knew my grandmother, you knew that she loved to talk. My grandmother was raised speaking Yiddish, the language of Jewish diaspora in Eastern Europe. For many years after the formation of Israel, legislation was passed prohibiting the use of Yiddish in publications, newspapers, radio, and theater. Yiddish, along with many other languages spoken by Jews, was replaced by Hebrew, a rejuvenated holy language, an attempt to tie their people to the land that they had stolen. Zionism is not a religion or an ethnicity. It is an ideology that reinforces itself by erasing histories, creating false narratives, and through the spilling of blood. That's right. In 1948, when Israel declared itself a state, it thrust itself into being through a bloody campaign of violence known as the Nakba. The Zionist settlers, armed by the US and the West, violently forced out the Arab inhabitants, displacing hundreds of thousands of people and taking so much of the land, burning villages, murdering thousands, and forcing the people into the area of Gaza and the West Bank, or to flee the area entirely. This was the beginning of the genocide that continues to this day, the ongoing Nakba. This was not supported by the West for their love of the Jewish people. If that were the case, Western countries would have accepted Jewish refugees after the Holocaust, instead of turning them away by the boatloads. It is also true that not all Jews are equal in Israel today. The poorest citizens of Israel are the Arab Jews. Some have been forced to build homes for European settlers with very poor working conditions and meager pay. There have also been reports of forced sterilization of Ethiopian Jews who have immigrated there. Think of this. The largest private donations of money to Israel in the United States come from a Christian Zionist organization called Christians United for Israel, a group with over 10 million members, more than the number of Jewish people in the United States or Israel. This group has the philosophy that the Holy Land must be occupied by Jews in order to pave the way for the second coming of Jesus Christ. Jews and Arabs alike are to be cannon fodder in the wars of the end times so that the land may be taken up by the Christians. Those Jews who don't die in those wars must be converted to be saved. That doesn't sound like a love for the Jewish people to me. We know that the United States gives Israel billions of dollars every year. But why does the US and the West so fervently support the Zionists? Well, in 1986, a sitting US senator said, "There is no apology to be made. It is the best $3 billion investment we make. If there weren't an Israel, the United States would have to invent an Israel to protect our interests in the area." That senator would go on to become the 46th president of the United States, Joseph Biden. Now, this teetering corpse sits in the White House and spreads the same lies and propaganda that those who came before him have spouted for decades. And much like the lies spread by George W. Bush leading up to the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, these lies are spread to work up the populace and dehumanize those that they wish to target, to set the stage and justify the coming and ongoing acts of destruction. This is all done for the purpose of capitalist control, extraction, and exploitation. Capitalism, the bloated behemoth with bones too big for its skin, spreads its wicked tendrils across the globe to feed its insatiable hunger in hopes of delaying its slow but inevitable decay. This is how the Zionist entity fulfills its role as the claw of Western imperialism. Huge companies like Raytheon and Lockheed Martin make billions of dollars selling weapons to Israel, and tech companies use Israel as a base of operations to research and perfect advanced surveillance technologies used to spy on civilians at home and abroad. The United States has used Israel as a proxy to arm apartheid South Africa and to crush people's liberation movements in Nicaragua, Guatemala, and the Philippines, among others. Security operatives from Israel have been sent all over the world to train police departments, including cities all over the US. They are, after all, experts in brutality. As an anti-Zionist Jew, I am used to my views being met with contempt and vitriol. The most popular slight that has been thrown at me, which, if you are like me, you have heard before, it has been thrown at me from members of my own family, is that I am a self-hating Jew. A self-hating Jew, as if my identity is so bound to a murderous ethno-state that to hate it is to hate my very own being. But that is not so. I love myself as a Jew because I know my history and I know where my heart lies. My heart lies with the Jews of the Warsaw Uprising, who fought against the Nazis, risking their lives and spilling their blood rather than being led passively to their death. My heart lies with the Jewish labor Bundists, whose concept of Doikat, meaning here-ness, meant that they strove for the rights of Jews to survive and thrive where they were and where they had been for generations, not in some faraway land their people hadn't known for thousands of years. And my heart lies with the hundreds of thousands of Jewish revolutionaries in Eastern Europe who fought and died for revolution, who knew the true enemy was not their fellow worker or neighbor, regardless of their religion or ethnicity, but was instead the capitalists and the bourgeoisie who sought to extract everything they could from their land, their bodies, and their labor. And finally, my heart lies with those who said never again. And when they said never again, they meant never again for us and for anyone else ever. So we must stand in solidarity with those in Palestine, and we must fight for their freedom. Free, free Palestine! Long live Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Long live Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Long live Palestine! Thank you. We have a few more speakers. We're going to have someone come up and share one of their experiences now. Thank you so much.
Every single attempt at nonviolent resistance has been brutally crushed by the Israeli army. 20 years ago, I went to Palestine and helped organize resistance to a military occupation. I participated in scores of direct actions and protests with hundreds of international activists from around the world. All these sincere attempts at protest were met with a military response from the Israeli army. The occupation continued. Injustice festered. It built edifices of hate. It built a prison infrastructure of walls and surveillance around every village. It fortified hilltops with armed reactionary zealots and gave them the full support of a nearly invincible modern army. It cut down olive trees, destroyed wells, demolished houses, terrorized the streets, and imprisoned and tortured a murdered whole generation of youth. The occupation continued. I lived with the most hospitable people I have ever known. I was given respect and unquestioning sanctuary from the most educated and intellectual people in the Middle East. I saw most of the energy of the Palestinian people focused on two things: the education of their people and the cultivation of their land. Students would brave any oppression they faced, climb over any mountain path to complete an exam, or wait at a checkpoint for hours to attend class. No tank could ever stop the school day in Palestine. Even if getting to class meant running through machine gun fire, breathing tear gas, or being shot in class itself when the Israeli army raked a whole school with fire. Farmers harvested olives from trees their families owned for hundreds of years. Every right-wing settler would descend from the hilltops to brutalize Palestinian farmers, all the while the Israeli army watched, nay, laughed at the injustice and theft occurring. Harvests were stolen. 1,000-year-old olive trees were cut down. People were beaten to a pulp. And Israeli snipers killed with impunity. Every year, the Palestinian farmers stood their ground on their land and came to peacefully harvest olives. The occupation continued. At one time, Gaza was the most liberal part of Palestine. Mini skirts and belly dancers were a common sight. Intellectuals and leftists organized, wrote radical theory, built a solid argument against the colonial project that is Israel. Every other nation in the world, other than America, came to condemn the actions of Israel against the Palestinians. Every single one. The balance had shifted. The argument was turning. The days of plane hijackings and hostage-taking were coming to a close. They had a legitimate argument, a legitimate debate about that. Everyone knew Palestine existed, and everyone agreed Palestine existed. All right. The Israeli right wing was desperate. The Palestinian right wing was marginal. And so the Israeli right wing helped the Palestinian right wing, and one justified the other. Just like here, just like everywhere.
That's right. That's right.
And when that Israeli right wing had its way, every leftist that could run a war crimes trial, organize a general strike, accurately report the news, or organize a guerrilla liberation movement was imprisoned or assassinated. The occupation continued. Now I'm here 20 years after I discovered that everything I was told as an American about the Palestinian people was a lie. They are the bravest people I have ever known. This is not my opinion alone. This impression comes mostly from the South African international activists I worked with. Many South African activists came to Palestine with their own country freshly out of apartheid and understood exactly what was happening. I have many friends from Gaza. They are poets, doctors, engineers who know love. And when the walls of the world's largest open-air prison with the highest population density on Earth were breached, a horrible rage poured forth. The occupation has continued. Its continuation is the root of all events that have transpired. If we cannot recognize the tsunami of hypocrisy America stands in, then there is no doubt that everything we have seen will continue to repeat itself. We must join the global consensus in condemning Israel's action against Palestine over the last 75 years. When we stopped funding South Africa, negotiations to end apartheid started in earnest and resolved without widespread bloodshed. It's up to us as America to create similar conditions and force this American client state to come to some kind of negotiated peace, make concessions, and allow the Palestinians to return. We need to end this conflict. Not only could it be a lasting peace, but it could be the geopolitical beginnings of the ending of fossil fuel dependence. The greatest crisis the world has ever faced. Please, let us end the occupation and solidarity with Palestine.
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Long live Palestine!
Long live Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Long live Palestine!
Long live Palestine!
Woo! All right. Thank you so much for sharing that. We have one more speaker? Two more speakers. Okay, one more speaker. Give it up for our last speaker before we go for a little march.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm nervous. I was asked to speak here today, and I'll be honest, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. It's scary being up here in front of a quite large crowd, being vulnerable, and not knowing if somebody will call me a Muslim extremist, dismiss my words, or even see me as a threat on this community. I've experienced this before, as many others have, and it is valid to be afraid. But I couldn't let my fear hold me back from speaking out. As working class people in the US, we have to speak out. It is our duty to not let the US back Israel and their genocide of Palestinian people unconditionally without an outcry from the US masses. Palestinians, Muslims, anti-Zionists, and oppressed people around the world are grieving the lives of thousands of martyrs lost in the past 2 weeks. Palestinian and Muslim diaspora are being gaslit into thinking their grief and their rage isn't valid. That you cannot mourn and honor the lives lost without being called an extremist or supporter of terrorism. We can mourn the lives of Palestinian freedom fighters who gave their lives to resist the conditions and violence they have been forced into for 75 plus years. The state of so-called Israel has shown the world what it wants. An Israel without Palestinians. We have seen Israel bombing hospitals, a church a couple days ago, residential areas within Gaza. They have evicted 1.1 million people. They keep pushing people into corners and saying, why don't you just fucking leave? And then they don't let them leave. There are reports of white phosphorus being used in Gaza. Israel has turned off all water, stopped all supplies from going in, including food and medical supplies. They will not let the people leave or receive aid. The genocide of Palestinians spills over beyond the borders of Israel. We saw this when a landlord, a filthy landlord in Chicago, stabbed a Palestinian mother and her son, murdering the 6-year-old boy. His name was Adea al-Fayoumi. Let's take a moment of silence to mourn these losses. I know you all know this, but I'll say it again. There's over 2.2 million people living within the walls of Gaza. More than 50% of those people are children. There are freedom-fighting kids in Gaza who know no other than to resist. Palestinian life is one of resistance. And to sit back from our comfy couches in the U.S. and watch this slaughter live on television and then go and say, they deserved it, they fucking had it coming, they struck first, Israel is just defending itself from terrorism, that is a completely ignorant and ahistorical position. Palestinian resistance has been going on for decades. Palestinians have been living under Israeli occupation for 75 years. 75 years. So to say this moment of history is one where they deserve it or they should peacefully endure the genocide of their people is absolutely ludicrous. Palestinians deserve self-determination too. The U.S. supported Ukraine to fight back against Russia, said that Ukraine has the right to defend itself. And why not for Palestinians? Because for the U.S., it has nothing to do with so-called human rights. It has everything to do with their imperialist affairs and who they need to back and who they need to dehumanize. Palestinians do deserve the right to self-determination. Many people in the U.S. are rallying behind a ceasefire agreement. People want this moment in history to end so they can go on living their lives knowing the U.S. backed the ceasefire. We wash off our hands of blood. We did our part. A ceasefire is not an end to violence. It is a continuation of the violence of occupation and colonialism. It is an attempt to disarm the Palestinian resistance. If the Palestinian fighters lay down their weapons, the occupation still continues. The daily life of checkpoints, restricted movement, daily violence from Israeli soldiers and settlers with impunity continues. The Palestinians still have no rights, no vote, no means to control their lives or the livelihood of their families, and the open-air prison that Gaza is continues. So what a ceasefire strives for is to end the momentary violence in order to preserve an uproar of a military offensive, or to slow fire, or the slow fire of decades of oppression. Which violence is greater? Oh, I misread before. Which violence is greater? The uproar of a military offensive or the slow fire of decades of oppression? The choice between ceasefire and continuing resistance is not a choice between peace and violence for Palestinian people, because they will face violence either way. There have been so many ceasefires in the past, and yet the struggle continues. I'm going to be clear. A ceasefire does not liberate Palestine. It is a choice between two forms of violence, a choice between the violence incurred for another 75 years of settler colonialism and the violence assumed in the struggle for liberation. And they deserve to struggle for their liberation. The Palestinians have made their choice, and we must stand with them. For all the people who have been martyred, we must demand a free Palestine, not a false peace. We must demand humanitarian aid and the end of the Israeli siege blockade on Gaza. We must demand the immediate release of over 7,000 prisoners being held and tortured in Israeli jails, a lot of which are children. We must demand the end to billions of US dollars being funneled to Israel. We must demand the end of this occupation. Palestine is not an isolated situation, but a microcosm of the entire imperialist system. All of the injustice and horrors of imperialism concentrate and manifest in Palestine. But imperialism is the global system that we all live under. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you are affected by, your life is shaped by imperialism. Imperialism is global monopoly capitalism. There are many imperialist countries in the world today: the US, Russia, China, France, Germany, just to name a few, and they are all competing for the spot of global superpower. Well, the US has that spot, and they will do anything in their power to keep it. Biden and the US government give their unconditional support to Israel because it benefits US imperialism to have a pawn in the Middle East.
That's right.
The US needs to compete with other imperialist countries, and the Middle East has been one of their main battlegrounds for decades, and it is fucking disgusting. What about those people who don't live in imperialist countries? Well, they too are pawns in the game of imperialism. These oppressed nations in Latin America, Africa, Asia, the Middle East, they're living under the boot of US imperialism. The US will plunder resources, control production and commodity exports, institute sanctions, offer aid loans with hefty debt contracts, start wars, initiate violence, do coups, all to control the people, their economies, their production, their livelihoods. Peoples and oppressed nations or third world countries have no bigger enemy than that of US imperialism. The imperialists benefit because they suffer. Capitalists advance while they try not to drown. We must support the Palestinian resistance against imperialism because the struggle of Palestinians is representative of the struggle of all oppressed peoples in the world. In order to support the Palestinian people, we must struggle against imperialism from within the belly of the beast.
That's right.
This is a moment for true international solidarity. If you pay attention, you can see people internationally are rising up. They're saying no to foreign invaders, no to occupation, no to Israel's genocide of Palestinians, and no to US imperialism. Thousands, and sometimes tens of thousands of people in cities across the world have taken to the streets in support of Palestinian liberation. Masses of people are protesting outside UN buildings, Israeli embassies, American embassies, French embassies, and you know what they're chanting? They're chanting, "Down with Israel, down with America."
Yep.
It is our duty here, in the belly of the beast, to fight back against US imperialism, to take to the streets in support of Palestine, to get organized for revolution, the only way forward for oppressed peoples in this world, including the oppressed working class and poor peoples in the US. We have to fight. We have to start our fight somewhere. And we have to start it here in Eugene. We have to do it by organizing in our neighborhoods, against our rich and self-interested landlords, against the police who serve them and surveil us. We can do it by organizing in our workplaces. If the workers were organized in a class-conscious movement, we could have coordinated. We could have had the coordination necessary to do general strike in support of Palestine. But instead, we have Instagram graphics. To shut down the U.S. economy and serve a big blow to U.S. imperialism, even if it's just for a moment. We could collectively stand against the U.S. funding Israel. Another thing we can do, we can all join and should join revolutionary organizations. We need to work with each other in open forums and local struggles. We need to educate ourselves on the struggles nationally and internationally. We need to wage all of our struggles collectively at the capitalist system. U.S. imperialism will crumble, and it is crumbling, but we have to make it so. We have to build the framework for a society we want to live in and topple the currently existing system, along with its police, its carceral system, and its global projects of plunder and control. We have to take inspiration from the Palestinian people and their resistance. We have to join their cause for the liberation of all. Down with U.S. imperialism! Down with colonization!
Down with colonization!
Down with Zionism!
Down with Zionism!
So when we say free Palestine, we mean no more siege of Gaza. We mean no more occupation. We mean Palestinian self-determination. We mean total sovereignty. We mean no more colonization. We do not mean two-state solution. We mean one free Palestine. A Palestine where Muslims, Christians, Jews all live. Where Palestinians themselves have the power to determine their own futures. We mean total liberation, and we mean by any means necessary. Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Viva, viva Palestina!
Viva Palestina!
Viva, viva Palestina!
Viva Palestina!
Thank you.
From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea,
Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Thank you so much for coming out today, Eugene. So, we are going to have a little march. We're going to take a few minutes to collect ourselves. We've got signs, we've got a banner, we've got water. Gotta stay hydrated, you know? And yeah, so we're gonna kind of post up in the street here, banner in the front. When everyone's kind of collected, we'll head out. We're gonna go, it shouldn't take that long. We're gonna go up a little bit around, and we'll come back here and disperse from here, all right? And remember, it might be scary to stand up and have your voice heard in the town, but being brave is not the absence of fear. It is moving and doing things through that fear. That is bravery. It is standing up for the right, to do the right thing despite your fear. And what they are doing in Palestine is way more scary than marching in the street. So the least we can do
Right on,
is
bro.
make ourselves heard.
That's right. That's right. Stand up.